Hey everybody, it's John Melly, the voiceover and production guru, with the video that I told you about that I would be sharing with you as a result of the questions that I got from the series of videos that I put up about how to produce a radio commercial. So this is a better vantage point than the camera at an angle that I had during the series of videos I put together. What we're going to do is, the question was that I got the most was, talk to me more about the reverb effect that you put on the voiceover. This is a spoof of a pharmaceutical commercial that I wrote and produced several years ago purely for my own savage amusement. And it's for a product that I made up called Amoridine. So let's take a listen to it.
Are you looking for love but can't seem to find it? Now you can with Amoridine. Amoridine is the pill that provides you with all the sensations of being in love without the hassle of interacting with another human being. No more deciding what to do, where to eat, or petty disagreements. Now you can have all the joy and pleasure of being in love all by yourself. Amoridine. Just one dose of hydrodeoxysucrose will have you giggling and wandering in a daze all day long. Amoridine is not for everyone. People in stable, healthy relationships should not take Amoridine. In certain cases, people taking Amoridine have developed an inability to think clearly. You should not drink, drive, walk, or talk while taking Amoridine. In rare cases, people have stopped breathing or developed sensations of being swept off their feet. You should not stop taking Amoridine suddenly, as it can lead to a broken heart.
I used to be sad and lonely, but with Amoridine, I'm happy and all by myself, with no sexual side effects.
Are you ready to be in love and by yourself at the same time? Ask your doctor for Amoridine.
Okay, so that should give you an idea, perhaps a window into my warped sense of humor. Let's explain a little bit about what's going on here. This top track here is the voiceover track. This middle track here is the music track. And this bottom track down here is the wet version of the voiceover track. It's a wet signal, and I'll explain that more in a moment. The question was, what did you do to get the reverb? And perhaps we should go into a little bit of why I do it. There's a thing that happens in audio production. It's called masking. And what happens is that our voice emits frequencies as we speak. And they're at all kinds of different frequencies at the same time. The S has a certain frequency. The consonants, all the vowels, they're at different frequencies. Music's the same way. The hi-hat, that sounds an awful lot like an S. And sometimes what happens is the frequencies in a music bed will mask frequencies in a voiceover track. Have you ever been in a situation where you got a voice track to sound just the way you want it, and then you go and add music to it, and then it sounds totally different? Something that might be happening is masking. And so what we're going to do is try and work around that in a way other than just making the music softer and making the voiceover track louder. One of the things that you can do is add reverb. And what's happening there is that the reverb gets those frequencies in our voiceover track to kind of linger around a little bit longer. So by extending the duration of having a certain frequency hanging around, it allows it to cut through the music, and we can keep the music at a decent volume, and we can keep the voiceover at a decent volume without making one really loud and another one really soft. It kind of keeps it all nice and tight and packaged well together, so you've got a nice full sound. So what we want to do is, I'm going to move this reverb off to the side here and recreate it for you and show you how I went about doing this. Then we'll apply it to this voiceover track. It's going to be the exact same thing. So what we want to do is select our voiceover track, and what we're going to do is, now let me step back for a minute. This is a voiceover track with left and right channel. It's still a mono signal. It's not in stereo. What we want to do is create a mix down in a left and right channel as well. Because what we're going to do, I can talk good, is add reverb to that, and so that the reverb will sound stereo. Now what we have to do is, like I said before, since we're going to get the frequencies to hang around a little bit longer, that means that this waveform that you see in front of you needs to be a little bit longer to accommodate the extra time that we're going to add to the whole thing. So what I like to do is I move the pointer down to the very end, and what I'm going to do is add a couple of seconds of silence. You can see that we're going to generate silence, and I've got 2 seconds already in there. That's pretty good for what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and do that. It's calculated it. Now you see it's been added to the end here. And what's going to happen is when I mix this down or apply the reverb to it, it's going to lengthen this waveform into this empty space here. If we didn't add this space at the end, the reverb would still would happen, but at the very end of it, it would get cut off and it would sound awkward. So what we want to do is give it room to grow. So we've got that there, and now let's go up and add some reverb. Let me first start off by saying I am not a mathematician. I am not an engineer. As a matter of fact, I failed my last quarter of geometry in high school. A lot of what I do when figuring out how much reverb I want to add to something is by ear and feeling. It's just what feels right, what sounds right. You do need to know a little bit about what these different parameters will do. Main thing that we're going to focus on here is output level. I don't have time to go into all of this here, but like I said, you can play around with this and see what sounds good and what sounds not so good. Output level. I'm taking the dry output and I'm making it 0%. And I'm making the wet output 100%. And the reason I'm doing that is I really want this wet. I want it to be a wet signal. Let me calculate it and then I'll play it for you and you'll hear what I'm talking about. And here it goes. And watch down here. See how this is stretched out off to the right here? It's gone into that area that we added some time to. It's moved into it. And so let's go to the very beginning and I'll play a little bit of it for you so you can hear why we call it a wet signal. Okay, so it gives you an idea why it's called wet. Sounds like it's underwater. Now, what we want to do is, to make this work correctly, we want to make absolutely certain that it's important to line up the wet track precisely with the beginning of the original voiceover track. Now, in order to do that, Adobe Audition has a nifty little tool. Your software might be a little different, but in how you access it, but it's pretty much the same concept. There's a nice snapping tool, and you snap to clips. And when I drag this over, you're going to see a white vertical line appear when this track lines up precisely with the beginning of these other tracks. See that white line? And that's the music track. I don't want it lined up with that. I want it lined up with the voiceover track. If you don't have it precisely lined up, you'll have some pretty funky effects, which can be useful in certain productions, but not for this one. So we've got it lined up nicely. Let's listen to how this sounds.
Are you looking for love but can't seem to find it? Now you can with Amoridine. Amoridine is the pill that provides you with all the sensations of being in love without the...
So now you can hear that there's a lot of reverb there. Now that might be good for a truck commercial or a monster truck event, but for this particular type of piece, we want the reverb to be more subtle. So what I've done now is, because I have a purely wet signal, as we've been calling it, I can adjust the volume on this, and it will allow me to add as much or as little reverb as I want.
Are you looking for love but can't seem to find it? Now you can with Amoridine. Amoridine.
So that's a lot more subtle. It adds just enough reverb to it so that it helps us with a masking issue. I haven't adjusted the music at all. It's down just a little bit, because if I had it too high, it would impact the ability to hear the voiceover. I have other tricks that I can show you about that too, but I don't have time for that right now. So at any rate, you can see how that all happens. I hope that this answers some questions about reverb, why I use it, how I put it together, and how you can adjust it by having a purely wet signal. And I hope that it helps you with your production tracks. If you have any comments, please feel free to leave me a comment on my blog or shoot me an email at john@johnmelly.com. I'd love to hear from you. I'm glad that these are working out for you, and thank you very much for watching, and we'll be back in a little while. Take care.